Okay. All right. Thank you. So over to you first, Bill.
Thanks, Neil. Um, Around 1992, there was a lot of uh, interest in the JFK assassination due to the recently released Oliver Stone movie, JFK. So I was a skeptic at the time of the critics' idea that there was a conspiracy. But due to all the discussion I had with friends, I decided, well, I'm going to go to the library and I'm going to study up on this subject. I got two books. One was David Bellin's Final Disclosure, and the other was Anthony Summers' book Conspiracy. And I was struck by how shallow Bellin's book was and how rich and informative and just explains a lot of things in Summers' book. So as soon as I started reading those books, I realized, yes, there was a conspiracy. And then I started reading other books. I found out there was a journal called The Third Decade, published by Jerry Rose. Started writing articles for that. And one of the things that was helped me out a lot was the university I used to go to in Long Beach, California. They had the 26 volumes, and plus they had 31 reels of microfilm of FBI reports, and I just spent hours going through those. And by sheer luck or blessing of God, I found that report that showed that the Texas School Book Depository moved into the building several months before the assassination, and that kind of started my journey. And here I am today.
Okay. That's great. And thank you for keeping it brief as well. So I'm going to share the screen now.
Right now.
So you want me to stop sharing? Okay.
I'll let you know when to share.
Okay.
Okay, so I've always been fascinated by the Texas School Book Depository. Uh, there's so many books and articles and documentaries, but it seems like the Texas School Book Depository was the most mysterious aspect about the JFK assassination. And like last week or last month, we talked about the electrical lines and the phone lines were powered down 5 minutes before the assassination. In a couple of minutes, was came back on. So, what is the explanation for that? There's still a lot we don't know. And but even more mysterious than the Texas School Book Depository is another school book depository, the Lone Star School Book Depository. Um, for a long time, I realized that there were two school book depositories in the city of Dallas. And I thought it was strange because of the 20 states that had the school book depository system. Normally, there was only one to serve the whole state, but only in Texas they had two, and both of them were in the same city. You would think that they would have one in Dallas and another one in like Austin, Texas, to kind of spread them out, but no, they were both in the same city. So I thought that was kind of strange. So I didn't realize the significance of the Lone Star School Book Depository until I started looking at where it was located. And as I started taking a closer look at it, I started to think that maybe this is an alternate ambush site in case JFK took a different route to the Trade Mart. So I'm going to show a map on the screen. I hope it's visible.
Yeah.
This is the motorcade route, and up here is Love Field. And as the President Kennedy and his other cars left Love Field. They made a left turn on Mockingbird Road and made a right turn on Lemon Avenue and came down this way until they went through downtown Dallas. And this is where Dealey Plaza was and is still today. And this is where he was shot. And then he came up this way. And well, if he wasn't shot, the motorcade would have gone up Harry Hines Avenue and returned to the airport this way. So the alternative route would have been from Love Field up here and made a left turn on Mockingbird and down this way to the Trade Mart. So this is a distance of about 2.5 miles and would take about 7 minutes to get the Trade Mart if JFK took this direction. I'd like to share a news article. A decision cost JFK his life. This is from the Dallas Morning News, 11/23/63. It says that President Kennedy, 1 week before his appearance in Dallas, had a decision to make. Would he go do the motorcade route, which would have taken him through Dealey Plaza and in front of the Texas School Book Depository, or would he make a fast ride from Love Field to the Trade Mart, the short 2.5 distant route? And according to this news article, because he decided to do the motorcade, that cost him his life. So, and then in the Governor John Connally's memoirs, In History's Shadow, he says that he vigorously opposed the motorcade. He was saying that the president would have been tired out. He needed to be fresh for all the important appearances of that day. Schedule was tight, and he was just pressuring JFK to cancel the motorcade route that was planned. And JFK, in spite of all his desire to cancel it, kept to the plan of having the motorcade. So let's think about that for a moment. What if President Kennedy had decided, okay, Governor Connally, I'm going to cancel the motorcade and just go straight to the Trade Mart? What would that mean? Well, of course, that would mean that the great event, as E. Howard Hunt liked to call it, would have been the great bust. You know, all those plans and preparations that had been in place for quite a bit of time would have gone totally wasted. So let's think about what some of those plans were. Number one, the Texas School Book Depository had to be moved into that vacant 411 Elm Street building, which overlooked that street intersection of Elm and Houston, the 120-degree turn. Secondly, you had to have recruit and organize and gunmen, make them familiar of the area, choose positions where they're supposed to be, check lines of sight and so forth. Then there's peripheral things like the epileptic man in the street, the phony Secret Service men on the grassy knoll, and so we can go on and on there. Um, so it seems to me that from my research that the Kennedy assassination in Dallas had to be prepared way in advance of November 22nd. I'm thinking they were getting ready to go about a year prior to that event. So forget about Chicago, forget about Miami. I think Dallas was the place where the assassination had to occur. So, so the conspirators, with that much long-range planning and attention to detail, you would think that they would have foreseen the possibility that Kennedy would not do the motorcade, but instead go to the Trade Mart direct. So in that case, they must have had an alternate ambush site. So let me see here if I can go to my notes here. So so there was so what does this alternate ambush site look like? You know, what should we expect to see when we're looking for it? It must be somewhere along the route from Love Field to the Trade Mart, that 2.5 mile stretch. So what do we need to look for? Well, number one, it needs to be a place where traffic flow is impeded to the point where the limousine would slow down to a near crawl so that the president would be an easy mark for the snipers. So there's actually three essential conditions for this potential ambush site, and that's one of them, the traffic slowdown. Number two, there needs to be multiple buildings in close proximity to this this spot where traffic's slowing down. You can't have just one building because you need multiple buildings to create so that there'll be confusion regarding where the shots came from, and that during that momentary confusion, that gives the assassins a time to escape. So if there was just a single building they were shooting from, they'd be immediately identified as the spot where they were located, and then they'd be surrounded. So there needs to be multiple buildings. And also these same buildings should be high enough to offer elevated positions for the snipers to make their shots. And that's the case in Dealey Plaza, where we had surrounding that intersection, the Texas School Book Depository, the Dow Tex building, and the records building in City Hall and so forth. And so there was some confusion during that time where those shots came from. And then there's the grassy knoll where there's some bushes. And the number three essential condition is that there must, at least one of the buildings needs to be under the control of people who are extreme right-wing, politically antagonistic to President Kennedy, to the point where they'd be happy to see him die. So those are the three conditions. And so go ahead, Neil, and show us the first slide.
Okay. Just before I do that, Bill, I just want to clarify something, because you were not looking at the map that you were showing, and I know most people on here understood what you were trying to say, but you actually were describing it in the wrong way round. So the one route was left out of Love Field to
Oh, okay.
Mockingbird, Lemon Avenue, Turtle Creek, downtown Dealey Plaza. That's the long route. The alternate route is right out of Love Field and down Harry Hines Boulevard to the Trade Mart, a couple of miles or so. Just wanted to clarify that because this is going to be
Okay.
uploaded as well, because people might get a bit confused. But
All right.
it's a
Thank
great
you for
map. It's a
pointing that
great
out.
map, but you were just, because you couldn't see what you were doing, it was slightly wrong. So I'm just going to share.
Okay, so you're going to share.
You see that?
Okay. Okay, this is a photograph that was taken in October of 1963. It's an aerial view of Dallas looking south. Uh, this picture was printed in the October 6, 1963 edition of the Dallas Morning News. And um, so this was about 6 weeks before the assassination. And so this gives you a pretty good idea of where everything was in relationship to each other at the time of the assassination, because this area changed a lot in the intervening years. I got this picture off the portal of Texas History website. So this is a very clear, high definition view, and I was able to zoom in on certain parts of it. So you can see there's downtown Dallas up there at the top. And then there's the Dallas Market Center. There's 3 buildings there. The one in the center is the Trade Mart. And on the other side to the left is the Furniture Mart. And on the other side to the right is Market Hall. And then we have Parkland Hospital that I have the arrow pointed to. Now at the lower left corner is St. Paul's Hospital. That was under construction at this time. It was due to open December 22nd, 1963. So the distance from that, and then the road that goes past St. Paul's Hospital on the left is Harry Hines Boulevard, and it passes Parkland Hospital, and it goes up to the Dallas Market Center. The broad road on the right is Stemmons Freeway, and then in that middle dark streak there, that's a railroad track. So the road leading into St. Paul's Hospital in the lower left corner to the Trade Mart, that's a distance about 1.5 miles. So, okay, the next slide.
Okay. Just bear with me a second. I'm pressing enter. I'm pressing page down and it's not moving. So I will just escape from that. Here we go.
Okay, so this is the upper half of the same picture. I got a point where there's the Texas School Book Depository, and there's the Cabana Hotel, a 10-story building. It had just been completed less than 9 months earlier, and it was open for business, a very lavishly decorated motel. It was during the weekend before the assassination, a lot of mobster figures, people had come to this motel. For example, Johnny Roselli was there, Charles Nicoletti, Edgar Eugene Brading, aka Jim Braden. And Jack Ruby was there too, visiting some friends. According to the official timeline, Jack Ruby was there for a short visit and left about 12:30, 30 minutes after midnight. But Seth Cantor, who wrote a book on Jack Ruby, says that he was still there at the Gabbana Hotel for 2 hours more. So that's kind of like missing time in the official chronology of Jack Ruby's movements. What was he doing there during those 2 hours? I believe it was assassination related. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, this gives an overview of that intersection. We see the Trade Mart, the center building there. And then we have Parkland Hospital. And then we have the Harry Hines coming from the left corner of the left bottom corner of the picture. And it kind of swerves to the left in front of the Trade Mart. And there's the railroad track, and it crosses Industrial Boulevard in front of the Trade Mart. And when JFK was assassinated, Will Greer drove at top speed towards Parkland Hospital. He took Stemmons Freeway, which is up at the top of the picture, coming down, and he made a right turn on Industrial Boulevard, going in between the Trade Mart and Market Hall on the other side, across the railroad track, and then continued left down Harry Hines Boulevard towards Parkland Hospital. And there's a description of that same railroad crossing in Vincent Bugliosi's book, Parkland. I like to read from it because it kind of illustrates how this intersection is can be an impediment to traffic. It says the motorcade exits the freeway onto the service road, barely slowing to make the right turn onto Industrial Boulevard, where the entrance to the Trade Mart is located. Sergeant Striegel and some other officers were there trying to flag them down, unaware that there's been a shooting. Striegel steps into the street and waves frantically for them to stop. The motorcade fast approaches Harry Hines Boulevard, where they'll have to navigate a 45-degree left turn toward Parkland Hospital. Just before Harry Hines, the road rises sharply to cross a railroad grade. The motorcycle escorts are familiar with the term, but limousine driver Bill Greer is not, and he pushes the president's car faster, moving dangerously close to the motor jockeys. With the limousine's front grille barking at their heels, the police escorts hit the rise wide open, go airborne, and nearly lose control as they slam to the earth in the middle of the boulevard, 30 feet away. On contact, the Harley-Davidson motorcycles bank hard into the left turn, sparks kicking up from their footstands, dragging across the pavement. The president's car is right behind them, hitting the rise with a whomp, then into the turn on squealing tires. Greer is doing all he can to handle this careening limousine, which bumps Corson's motorcycle briefly into the curb. The men frantically pull out of the turn and accelerate toward the emergency entrance of Parkland Hospital, 3/4 of a mile up the road. It is a wonder they haven't wrecked yet. So, so if it, so railroad crossings, you need to slow down for them. Uh, it could damage your tires. It could damage your suspension, um, and the undercarriage. So you need to take them slowly. And of course, as we see with Will Greer, he was very reckless in crossing this railroad crossing. Now, if it's that way coming off the freeway, then I would think that it's the same way if there was a if our motorcade or if our president's limousine had decided to use this route, he would have had to slow down for this railroad crossing too. And of course, right after the railroad crossing, you would slow down for the entrance into the Trade Mart. So I can just visualize the president's limousine just stalled in behind the advance car and the pilot car and the escort motorcycles as they as these vehicles were trying to get over the railroad track in a slow movement. So at this point in time, he would be very vulnerable to a shooter. Okay, so um, so across the street from the Trade Mart are some buildings. And what are these buildings? So the next slide will identify these buildings. Okay, so you see the Trade Mart, there's the railroad crossing, there's Harry Hines Boulevard, and we have three buildings. The lower building is Binswanger Glass Company. It was it did the window glass for the Cabana Motel. That was its biggest contract. And next to that is the Lone Star School Book Depository. And then next to that one, that odd-shaped building is Napa Auto Parts. So those are the three buildings. Let's look at the next slide. Okay, I made a map of the area. So that area where Binswanger Glass, Lone Star School Book Depository, Napa Auto Parts, that was all a vacant lot in 1961. Binswanger Glass constructed a building there, or actually Trammell Crow constructed the Binswanger Glass building. He was also the one that constructed those three buildings over there, Market Hall, Trade Mart, and Furniture Hall. He's a big time real estate dealer. And I think even to this day, his company is the largest private owner of real estate in the country. And then we have the Lone Star School Book Depository. That opened 2 months later, November of 1962. And then the third building, Napa Auto Parts, they began constructing that in April of 1963. It wasn't due to be open until February of 1964. So on the day of the assassination, that was a vacant building. I believe that could be a place where a sniper team could be positioned. It was very close to the railroad track. The sniper team could be disguised as construction workers. So I believe that if they were on the roof, they would have an elevated position. So so that satisfies essential condition number 2, multiple buildings with elevated positions. Okay, next slide, please. This is another view of a Trade Mart, and there at the lower, oops, excuse me. We see the Ben Swager Glass, Lone Star School Book Depository, and Napa Auto Parts. And then we have the next slide shows a different perspective. This is from a postcard, 1966. We're looking over the top of the Trade Mart towards the intersection. You can see how it rises there to a hump before it goes to Harry Hines Boulevard. We see Napa Auto Parts, Lone Star School Book Depository, and Ben Swager Glass. So, so this gives you another view. Okay, so next slide, please. This was the man, the executive vice president of the Lone Star School Book Depository, Ross Carlton. He was very active politically. In 1956, he ran for Attorney General of the state of Texas. He was for segregation and states' rights. And next slide. This is from an FBI report. The second paragraph says, a neighbor of Mr. Davidson's, namely Elton D. Marsh, said after viewing television broadcasts concerning the assassination of President Kennedy, he recognized the building where the assaults allegedly, where the assassins allegedly hid as the Texas School Book Depository building, where his attorney acquaintance, namely Ross Carlton, had his office. Carlton supposedly was president of the Texas Textbook Company in the same building and was admittedly anti-Kennedy administration and outwardly outspoken in indicating that he was a vicious personal enemy of the vice president, Lyndon B. Johnson. Carlton was apparently a segregationist and associate of reactionary groups in Dallas. Carlton also admittedly had an extensive gun collection. In view of this, Marsh was of the opinion that Ross Carlton could be suspect in connection with the assassination of President Kennedy. Now, it seems like from what we know about the Texas School Book Depository, the owner of it was Jack Kaysen. And it doesn't seem like Ross Carlton would be connected with the Texas School Book Depository, except this Elton Marsh says that he had an office there. We might possibly dismiss this as maybe he was confused in his mind and he really meant the Lone Star School Book Depository, but I was reading the manuscript of Laura Kittrell, 90 pages, describing she's worked at the Texas Employment Commission and met Lee Harvey Oswald and tried to help him get a job. And she got a phone call from some woman. I think it was Ruth Payne. I'm not sure. She didn't know, but she said Lee Harvey Oswald got a job at Texas School Book Depository. And in her mind, Ross Carlton was the one that vetted the applicants at that place. So I think there was like maybe Ross Carlton was like a secret partner in the Texas School Book Depository. And maybe he was the one that controlled the employment of people at the Texas School Book Depository, as well as the Lone Star School Book Depository, for, I believe, security reasons. So there we have it. The third essential condition, extreme right-wing
We lost you, Bill.
Okay, good. I thought it was me. Just like, no.
We lost Bill.
Yep. No sound.
I'm sure he'll come right back.
Well, there he is, but I can't. Okay. All right. I'll just stop the recording, guys. Please remind me to put it back on. Okay. All right.
Okay.
So thanks.
Well, let me finish one more thing. The book Advanced Man by Jerry Bruno, he was talking about a debate about going to the women's building versus the Trade Mart. He says that if Kennedy had done that, he would have avoided the danger zone in front of the Texas School Book Depository. And it's true, he would have avoided the danger zone in front of the Trade Mart. However, I think that the conspirators, if they were thinking that far ahead, they must have had a third ambush site in case he decided to speak at the women's building instead of the Trade Mart. And before I pass it on to Peter, I got an email from Nancy Weiford.
Yeah, Nancy's on the call, Bill.
Oh, she is? Okay. And she gave me a very informative email about the hold on a second, about the electrical power outage. And I'd like to read that email, and I think it'll be a good introduction to Peter's talk. Okay. He says, "Hi, Bill. I interviewed Geneva Hine. That was the secretary of the School Book Depository in June 1972. I did not tape phone calls, but I did take shorthand, was therefore able to get conversations down verbatim. She had a rather tragic life. Her daughter died of diphtheria when she was 8 years old. Her husband developed mental problems and committed suicide.
Yeah.
Both happened in the fall months, so Geneva told me the fall was always a somber time for her. She told Nancy these things. She said the person who had the change box, well, some of this is not pertinent, so I'm going to skip down. She said she confirmed that there were 3 separate phone number lines that came into the Texas School Book Depository phone desk. She said it was not really a switchboard like a PBX with connectors and plug inserts. She said that when they were in the Dow Tex building, they did have an actual switchboard, and she knew how to use it very well. In the Texas School Book Depository, it was instead a large desk phone that had little bulbs on it that could light up when a call came in, would blink on hold, and it would show nothing if the line was unoccupied or if the line was dead. She definitely remembered that the phones and lights went out after the other girls had left the floor to go outside and see the motorcade. She said she just figured that people were not calling because they were watching motorcade and did not see anything nefarious about it. I asked if there were other times before and after that day that electricity and power and phones went out. She said maybe one other time. She recalled once when they were going to some major electrical repair work in the building, and the power company came and made sure the switch was off. This must have been during that short period of time when after the book depository moved in. She did not know where the switch she spoke of was actually located. She said she never went to the basement as it was sort of creepy and dark, which is where I postulate the switch was. Because the phones were off, she decided to go to the window and view the motorcade from there, since she actually did see JFK and Jacqueline in their limo on Houston and execute that turn on Elm, that validated to me that the event of the phones were off did occur before 12:30. Let's see. Skipping down, she said she moved to the next office, and she heard a woman speaking in the Southwest Publishing office on the phone. So that indicated the phones were back on for a brief period of time. Since Geneva could hear someone on the phone, she could see her through the door window and she could hear her talking. I think she said somewhere that this was Judy Johnson that was making that phone call. So anyway, that leads into what Peter's going to talk about, and I'm going to hand it off to him.
Okay, but just before we do that, Bill, we need to give people the opportunity to ask questions.
Sure. Yeah.
Specifically about this subject. Mike Phillips, you've got a couple of questions, have you?
Yes, thanks, Bill. That was very interesting. I didn't know anything about this or your research. Very good. Yeah, a couple of quick questions. First, where you showed those aerial photos of the Lone Star building depository. Do you know in 1963 were there any buildings on the other side of that railway crossing where they would have had to have slowed down that could have been used as a triangulation? You know, presumably if there was a team there. And the second one was, have you in your research come across any reports of any suspicious looking people that were reported to the local police around that time? Because I remember reading somewhere, I can't find the source, that someone was acting suspiciously on Stemmons between the TSBD and the Trade Mart. Just wondered if you'd come across any of that.
Yes, I believe it is possible that maybe not the Trade Mart, but maybe Market Hall might have had a sniper team, but that would be speculation. I believe that because of the Lone Star Schoolbook Depository, I think it would be enough to have a sniper or a couple of sniper teams, one on the top of the roof of Napa Auto Parts and one on the top of the roof of the Schoolbook Depository. So as to your second question, yes, in the book Oswald talked, they go into great detail of, well, sketchy details about a man named John Elrod, who was arrested by the police. They got a report that someone was carrying a rifle and walking along the railroad track next to Harry Hines Boulevard, which is right in that vicinity.
Okay.
And so when the police arrived, they picked up this guy named John Elrod. He didn't have the gun with him, but they arrested him, and he was a cellmate of Lee Harvey Oswald. Because he doesn't seem like the kind of guy that would be a professional hitman. He was an older man, had gotten into trouble at various places, kind of like that recent Trump shooter, Ruth, I guess, kind of been all over the place. So I believe that Elrod was the alternative Patsy. And I think he may be showing off just to draw attention to himself, just as like Matthew Crooks was drawing attention to himself, even though there was shooters behind him when the Trump shooting back in July. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, thanks.
Hi, I have a question. This is Nancy.
Yes. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Bill. Early when you were speaking, you said that the ambush site needed three elements: a traffic slowdown, multiple buildings, and I didn't catch the third.
Oh, one of the buildings has to be under the control of someone with or people who are extreme right-wing politically.
Okay, thank you.
That'd be Ross Carlton. And the Texas School Book Depository was like that too. Roy Truly hated Kennedy because of his foreign policies and because he believed he was a race mixer. And also, the wife of the owner, Jack Kaysen, said at a dinner party in 1961 that someone ought to shoot JFK. So that indicates to me that the Texas School Book Depository was also controlled by extreme right-wing elements.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Bill, can I just press you on the lead time to set up the assassination in Dallas? I guess the Lone Star Book Depository on Harry Hines, it's a modern 1963 structure that probably isn't going to take a great deal of time to construct. You know, it's not a old-fashioned brick building, turn of the century brick building. But obviously you're going to have to get planning permission. And
Exactly.
you know, you're going to have to, there's a lot of organization prior to actually, you know, putting the first, you know, stone in the ground or piece of steel in the ground or whatever. Do you feel confident then? I mean, if you said it was completed in November 62, that's a year before the assassination.
Yes.
So in reality, when do you, and because you are somewhat dismissive, it seems, I might be wrong, of Chicago and Miami. So when do you actually think, what was the you know, the tipping point, the trigger point of when it was decided to run this event in Dallas?
Well, I agree with Mae Brussel, a researcher in California who passed away 35 years ago, that the decision to kill Kennedy was right after the nomination, July 1960. And in September 1960, the mafia began organizing plots to kill Castro. And I believe that that is the assassination of President Kennedy was supposed to piggyback on those Castro plots. Now, when did they decide to have the big event in Texas? I believe it was September 1960. My understanding is that September 1960, both Nixon and Kennedy were campaigning for president, and they both arrived in Dallas about pretty much the same time in September. And Nixon was able to draw a huge crowd at the Women's Building or the Memorial Auditorium in the State Fairgrounds, like 100,000 people. And it was a big success for him. But when Kennedy came afterwards, he drew like 170,000 people. So I think that was kind of a slap in the face to the ultra right wing people at that time, that he could draw a gigantic crowd and much bigger than the one Nixon, their preferred candidate, Nixon, got. So in the following year, 1961, the Sexton School Grocery Company was occupying the 411 Elm Street building, and obviously the conspirators needed that building. So Trammell Crow, who also built the Trade Mart and other buildings, he built the new site for Sexton Grocery Company beginning in June of 1961, and the Sexton Company moved out of it in November of 61. So I believe that the preparations for the event in Dallas will at least go back at least 2 years.
And that's very interesting. Gary Severson, you've got a question?
Yeah, Bill, I agree with the things you just said about the pre-planning and time frame. I just qualify it by suggesting that Vince Palomera's research shows that the White House was resisting going to Dallas during that 2-year lead up, and that the Texas trip only went as far as Fort Worth. And on September 25th, when I saw Kennedy in North Dakota and believed there was a plot there, that night of September 25th, Kennedy flew on to Montana and stayed overnight at Jackson Hole. And it was that night that the White House agreed to add Dallas to the Texas itinerary. Now, I don't know how that, I don't think it contradicts what you're saying. It's just an added dimension, because all the planning could have been going on. And the plotters may have assumed that it would be easy to get Dallas into the itinerary. But they, just like you said, they had to get the bookstore, the book depository online in the same way that they had to get Dallas into the itinerary. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes a lot of sense.
Could I add something, or?
Yes, please,
Sure.
Peter.
So a couple things that Bill and I were talking about. First of all, the building Bill's talking about was seasonal, right? It was seasonal. It was actually closed during the when the assassination would have taken place. So it would have been very easy to have something happen because there wouldn't have been anyone there. The second thing, as far as the power, one thing that I was told that is very interesting is there was a gentleman, I'm sure most of you have seen it. There's a gentleman who had a pretty big guy. He's if you're on the steps of the depository you're facing out, he's to the right, maybe about 20-30 yards. He's got a big helmet. He looks like a power guy, like he works for the power company.
Mhm.
And he's the only one that's facing at all times the direction as if he's going to signal somebody. And shortly after the assassination, he's one of the first people that's put into a police car and taken away.
I think we lost Peter.
No, we've got Peter. Can I just say, Peter, you
Okay.
are freezing a little bit. Do you want to turn your audio off? Because you might have a bandwidth problem.
You
Not
mean
your
my
audio,
video?
the video off, please. Yeah. Keep your audio on.
All right, is that better?
Yeah. Could you just repeat that statement regarding the power worker?
Sure. So if you look closely, if you're facing the street, if you're on the steps of the depository facing the street, to the right, maybe about 20 people down, there's a very big burly man with a helmet on.
Hmm.
And he looks like he works for the power company. And he's the only one that faces at all times towards the depository as if he's about to signal somebody or get a signal. And he's one of the first people that's put into a police car and taken away after the shooting. So I'm not sure if anybody knows exactly who he was. I have not seen his name, but you know, there's a very good chance that there was a reason why briefly that the power went off. And I think without getting into it now, it's something that I'll bring up a little bit in my presentation. But the other part was that that building would have been closed. And I don't know if you want to talk about it, Bill, but there was a lawsuit that somebody actually was terminated, who was an engineer, who would have been somebody who would have been going up and down during that time period. he sued later and won some money because he lost his job in October. But he didn't lose as much, he didn't win as much money because they said that during that period of November, they would have been closed anyhow.
You're talking about the Lone Star building, are you?
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Peter brings up a very, very good point here. The Lone Star School Book Depository was originally located at 707 Browder Street, which is just a block from the Jaggers Chili Stovall building at 522 Browder Street. It had been at that location since 1923, I believe. And then all of a sudden it builds this building on next to the Trade Mart in 1962. So even though the city directories and the phone directories list the Lone Star at on Harry Hines, it still continued to use the Browder Street building into the late 60s, and that's where the lawsuit was that Peter's talking about at the Browder Street
Right.
building. They continued to use the Harry Hines building throughout the year. So it wasn't a relocation; it was just adding a new facility.
Yeah.
Okay.
Quite a lot of books sold in Dallas.
It's amazing how they wanted to increase their office and storage space at exactly the same time as the Texas School Book Depository increased their office and storage space in
Yep.
63.
Yeah, and no other major city like Houston or Austin got a book depository themselves.
Right.
No, none of them.
Okay, well, just before we move on to Peter, I just had one final question regarding the alternate choice for the luncheon speech, being the Women's Building in Fair Park.
Yeah.
What probability is there that if the motorcade had turned right, gone down Harry Hines that way onto Stemmons or whatever, that they would come off at Dealey Plaza to get to Fair Park? Is there any probability of that, or would they have gone further around to the south of Dallas using that freeway and come off later to Fair Park? I mean, I don't know how far it extended the freeway. In other words, I'm just questioning whether there is a third assassination site, or could Dealey Plaza have also been an assassination site if they were coming in that direction to Fair Park?
Yeah, could be that they could have come that direction. I think what Bruno is talking about is a discussion that the motorcade would start in Fort Worth. I mean, JFK would not get on the airplane, but he would just stay in his vehicle, go from Fort Worth directly through Dealey Plaza on Main Street, going quickly.
Yes.
And making a right turn, I think on Acard Street to get to the fairgrounds.
Right.
So he was thinking that would be the possibility if JFK had decided to go to the airport and come to the Women's Building from that direction. He would have gone through that same intersection, and it would have been he would either had to continue down Harry Hines Boulevard and down Field Street to get to the fairgrounds, or he would have had to cross that railroad crossing.
Yeah.
So
okay, so it's not actually a given that they needed a third site.
Exactly.
They could have just covered it with the two sites that we're talking about. Okay,
Sure.
all right. Are there any other final questions to Bill, just specifically on this subject? No, okay. All right. Well, thanks for that, Bill. Please stay on, because obviously we've got Peter to come and maybe some other questions that people
Sure.
might ask you regarding, just maybe the TSBD in general and a lot of your other work. Okay,
Okay.
Peter, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, do you want to take a break? Want to take a break first, or you want me to just go ahead?
Well, I think we could probably press on for the next half an hour section, I think. Again, Peter, if you could, if you get bandwidth problems, just go to audio only. But if you could just give us a, small intro on your background and how you got into this.
Sure. So first article I wrote about JFK was when I was in college, 1984. I had gone to the Commonwealth Club and had met and interviewed Pierre Salinger. And shortly after that, of course, the JFK movie comes out. And I originally studied that, and then I got off track into a lot of the pre-World War II, our relationship with Britain, the relationship of intelligence and universities up in Boulder, Colorado in the 50s. And then sort of started seeing all of these different individuals who keep showing up over and over again in different events. And I got heavily into the JFK, RFK, the Zodiac, the Manson murders, and the D.B. Cooper with Bill Weston. And so I met Bill responding to an article he had written, the original article he had written about Capehart and the Zodiac, etc. And I had found a letter that a woman had written to the police chief Redden shortly after the RFK assassination, which led to me finding about 3 or 4 more letters that this woman had written over a period of 6 years to the FAA, the FBI, all these different agencies, bringing a family, specific individuals into every crime. And so Bill and I have written articles about all of that at his wonderful site, ZodiacKillerIdentified.com, which is a little misleading because it's not all about the Zodiac. And I don't know how many people are familiar with Reed Whitson. There's a lot of new work there on Reed Whitson, the work he did in Scotland. And this ties around all of the different murders, and it comes back to the JFK. And I have just finished up, I haven't gone live with it yet, but I finished up an 8-series program on YouTube called The People in the Pantry, which identifies and talks about the key individuals that were in the pantry, what they did before, why they were there, and what they did after in their careers. And started seeing a very specific pattern and identified at least 12 individuals that were in Dealey Plaza that were also in the pantry when the assassination happened for Robert Kennedy. And I'll touch upon a few of them today, but it would take way too much time, to try to show everything here today. So that's how I've gotten into it. And Bill and I have several articles that will be coming up pretty soon. But I would recommend anybody who's interested in any of these subjects to go over there, because our work and what we put together is different than anything else that's out there. And that's hopefully the same thing I'm going to bring to the table today. I'm certainly not as well versed as most of you, and I certainly will not try to give absolutes. So as I identify people that I believe are there, it's based on research, and it's based on an individual whose father was pretty involved in many of these operations, all the way back to one of the original task force members under the Eisenhower administration that put the original Bay of Pigs together. And so what I'm going to present today is a group of people who have a common bond, and that is the failed event in Cuba in the early 60s, where many of them only got out of prison 6-7 months before this assassination happened. And so I agree with Bill on the part that this was originally planned back in '62, about at least a year before. And the approach that I'm taking today is that there were multiple groups of people who probably didn't know what the other group was doing. It's a need to know basis. It's the same thing in the RFK assassination. There's a lot of people that are there to play a specific role, but they don't necessarily know what that role is. Are you hearing me okay, by the way?
Yeah, I can hear you, Peter. You're freezing a little bit, video
Turn off
wise.
video then.
Yeah. So are you gonna? Would you like to share your screen now and
Yeah,
go
absolutely.
into your core beliefs and the presentation specifically?
Yeah. So let me know. Can everybody see that?
Not yet. Now we can.
Alrighty.
So do you want to
Pick it up, or you like a
put
little
that?
bigger?
Do you want to put that into
Yes.
slide? If you go to view, slideshow, higher. Yeah.
Okay. So the story that I'm going to bring here is largely has to do with the 7th floor, largely has to do with the roof, and at the very end, I'll introduce an object that has never really been identified before. Neil and I talked about it yesterday a little bit, and it's quite fascinating, the possibility of what it was, and possibility of how the shooter may have escaped. So we have a 7th floor fire drill, which involves 7 deputy sheriffs who all were told to stand in front of the sheriff's building. They were all told not to participate in any manner whatsoever in security, not to interfere with people, but just stand there in case something happens. And the individuals that we're largely going to talk about here today starts with Harry Weatherford. And many of these people here were pallbearers in his funeral. We all know who Marion Baker was, the first person supposedly that met Truly to go up the floor, saw Oswald, and then proceeded to go up to the 7th floor. So everybody here that's on this list, in their depositions or in their statements, official statements to the sheriff, to Mr. Decker, interacted with the 7th floor. Went up on the 7th floor, searched the 7th floor. 1 or 2 of them even tried to get onto the roof. And as we know later, there were actual agents on the roof walking around. So here's Harry Weatherford. Take this off here so that you can see this here. And so you see here when he died, we go down here as pallbearers. You know, Paul Mercer, you know, Ralph Weaver, Bob Pope, Bill Weissman, DeShazo, A.D. McCurley, William McCarthy. Of course, a couple other people that he worked with are dead by now. But here's a picture of Harry down at the sheriff's office shortly after he took in Larry Flora. This is Larry Flora sitting here giving his statement. This is one of the gentlemen who searched Larry Flora and then turned him over to several detectives, who then Harry Weatherford felt compelled to bring him down in person. Here's Weatherford up here at the Jack Ruby trial. This was a picture of him late. And his deposition, or his story, talks about, they all start the same, that I was standing in front of the sheriff's office. There is, of course, discussion that he could have been told to be on the roof of the records building. But the current story goes with a lot of these folks, as soon as they heard the shooting, They all take off towards the railroad tracks. And most of them get there. Some of them turn back. Some of them are searching on near the picket fence. But all of them suddenly are told that no, there's nothing here. We've got this. Go back to the Texas School Book Depository because we've heard that's where the shooting comes from. So they all go and they're waiting. Here they are waiting after they've cleared everybody. And if you look here, this is quite a group of people. You have Billy Doherty right here.
Jack Doherty.
I'm sorry?
Jack.
I'm sorry, Jack Doherty, yeah, with his power sander in his hand, because his story was very convoluted, that he was up and down different floors, that he went back to work by himself. So for some reason, he felt compelled to bring down this power sander. You have a gentleman right here who's on the walkie-talkie. I'm sure some of you know who this gentleman is here. I'm not positive who he is yet. I would love some help with that. This guy here is not Jack Ruby, but he certainly looks like him somewhat. And then you have this gentleman right here, who's quite prominent in the story. He's performing some tradecraft right here where he's covering up his face as a picture is being taken. And they're all sitting here waiting, watching for Captain Fritz to show up, which momentarily 2 cars are going to show up full of Fritz and his people, as well as what's been termed Secret Service agents, which we know there weren't any other Secret Service agents that weren't part of the procession, the parade. There wasn't any walking around, but so they're government agents, but I don't believe they're Secret Service agents. And these are the folks that show up, car stops, they immediately, without even stopping, a couple police come towards them, but they don't even bother stopping. They jog in like as if right on cue, right through the front door, and are going to meet. Here's an aerial view that we can refer to from time to time here, but you have such a close proximity here that everything is. So when the shooting starts happening, they run over here. It's what, a couple hundred yards maybe of a run. And the story of you know, there's nothing here, everybody get back. I think in my point of view that was kind of planned, just like it was planned very specifically by Decker to have everybody standing by waiting in case something happened. So getting back to Jack Doherty, just looking at a couple of the individuals who were in the building that interacted quite significantly with the sheriff's department, with the Dallas Police Department, with the government agents that were searching. He had a lot of trouble, as you know, with his facts and his timing and where he was, what floor he was on. And Roy truly tried to compensate for that by saying that he was mentally retarded. And I'm quoting that. Obviously, we wouldn't call somebody mentally retarded today, but that's the quote here at the time. In reality, he had, see over here, he was discharged medically for epilepsy. So he really didn't have, he was not mentally retarded. And what happened was when he had to give his testimonies again, his father sat down with him to help him as he gave his depositions and his statements. So he's a very suspicious person and very confused. From up on the 6th floor, he's going down, he goes to lunch, then all of a sudden he's you know, even though they all take lunch pretty much at the same time, he starts earlier. So they try to compensate by saying, well, perhaps he went up earlier to go back to work laying the floor. He was one of the people, but 6 or 7 of them that were laying the floor that day up on the 6th floor. That's why he has that sander in his hand. But it seems highly unlikely that you would be going up and down the floors carrying your power sander in your hand. So I think it was a prop, and I'm not sure what his role was, but a lot of these individuals basically, just like in the RFK assassination, created chaos and conflict, which makes it very difficult to nail down where everybody was at any given time, before, during, and after. Then you have Harry Olson. Harry Olson was an officer who was fired twice from the Dallas Police Department. He was hired back before the shooting, and then after the shooting, I think it was 64, could have been like at the end of 63, he was let go again. And he headed out to California. And this here is a small portion of a list of all the calls he made when he got there. And some interesting ones here would be right here. This is the West Coast commander for the Marines, Commander David W. Berger. William Trask is a familiar name. And there's a lot of finance companies and a lot of car dealerships that are being called. So this is part of about 16 pages worth of calls that the FBI was analyzing, tracking him down as far as what he was doing once he got to Long Beach in California. In the RFK assassination, there are 3 Olsons that were police officers, one of which was a part-time that worked day shift and didn't have any particular purpose. Not saying they were related, but it's something that to look into. But he's another gentleman that just really doesn't make sense, and was looked at very suspiciously because what he was saying didn't make any sense. So you have Luke Mooney. There's his statement. Of course, he's one of many people who claim to been, within 5 or 10 feet of when he found the rifle. He also is the person who, and so he's up by himself, I believe, when this happens, when he finds the shells. He calls down to Fritz, tells him to come on up. Chief Lumpkin, several other officers for the Dallas police show up. They come up to the 6th floor. They're told not to touch anything. 5 minutes later, Fritz comes up. And so about 2 minutes after arriving, after he finds the shells, then you have Deputy Eugene Boone calling out that he had found the rifle shoved between 2 rows of boxes. And he'll be one of several people that claims to have been one of the first people to find the rifle. So what also is very interesting is, even though you have the sheriff's department running up and down, creating all kinds of confusion for about a half hour, suddenly when they find a rifle and they find these hulls, they're all told, leave the building, go back down to the sheriff's office. Let's everybody head back and tell Fritz what happened. Or excuse me, tell Decker what happened. So I find that kind of odd that they would just leave. And getting back to Harry Weatherford for a second, one of his first acts when he gets in is he claims he walks up, he looks around on the 1st floor, 2nd floor, and then he jumps out the window onto a sort of an overhang, claiming that what he's doing is he's looking for rifle shells that could have fallen. So we next see him climbing back in the window. And what's interesting there is he says that he climbs back in the window and continues to search with an unknown Dallas police detective. Where does he go from here? Well, of course, up to the 7th floor. You have Walters heading up to the 7th floor. You have Webster and Victory, who had already, these are Dallas officers, I believe, had already gone up to the 7th floor, and he says, I went up there too. He says, as I started up there, Webster came to the head of the stairs and said they needed lights. We need lights. So he left the building, walked all the way down to the sheriff's office, picked up Deputy L.C. Smith with some heavy lights, and then they met Boone back, who had come down with the Yoons boy, the young boy who claimed that he saw somebody with a bald spot leaning out. Well, actually, that's a different person. Sorry. This would be Betzner that he's bringing down at this point. But also the black gentleman who they picked up and brought down in the 3-wheeler. He claims that he saw somebody very specifically holding a rifle out, and he described him with missing a patch of hair. And one of the people that's missing a patch of hair that's standing around, I believe, is Billy Lovelady. So here, they are on their way to pick up lights. They get back. Somebody else has already put a bunch of lights up on the stairs, searchlights. This is kind of out of place here, but this is Buddy Walters, who's standing after he comes down where they're potentially finding, a bullet in the grass, right? He's murdered along with several other Dallas sheriffs that were kidnapped. And of course, only one of them survives, and Buddy Walters is one of the ones that shot and killed. So he's gone and has never really participated after that in any kind of statements, or never went in front of the House Assassinations Committee, etc. So this is, of course, the Daltex building right here. This is the back area, and this car right here may be something that's quite significant. It's not for sure yet, but I believe several people believe that that's owned by the gentleman who would have been in charge of naval intelligence for Dallas up until about 1959 or so. And that's David Soy, Captain David Soy. And we find out from Captain David Soy's obituary that he was sitting in his car waiting for Kennedy to drive by when he was shot. So that's something that I don't know exactly where the car is yet, or if this is his car, but this is the direction I'm being pointed to. Here's another some information on Jack Doherty. Here's some photos of him when he's younger. This is what he looked like. I'm not sure that that's accurate here, but I did show you what he looked like in '63. He was one of the ones that was standing right there waiting to come in. So of course he has a military background as well. Almost all of these sheriffs, almost all of these police officers do. They have connections. So when they get back to the building, everybody's running around with lights. Everybody's searching all the floors. And now it's 1:02, 32 minutes after the shooting takes place. This is the story that I'm not sure that a lot of people have heard. And some of you may have, but I think it's quite relevant. So at the fire station, we have Leslie Lon Warnock Jr., who gets a phone call. This is his 3-page statement, and it kind of reads almost like a novel. He starts out at, as I recall the sad day, it was a cold but sunny day full of hope. Only one thing seemed not right otherwise to make it a perfect day. I had a very strange feeling something was not right. Something was going to happen. I had awakened early as usual at 5:15 to go to work. On arriving at work, Station 3, I was told to write the seat, assume the duties of the acting officer of the #1 salvage wagon for the shift. Then he throws in this name of Harry Combs was the driver, and one other man was riding the back end. I searched and I found a Combs that was a Dallas police officer, but this was in the early 1900s. I found a photo of, that I'll show you in a minute, of Warnock when he graduated in the 50s from the fire department. But what he's saying is that they're sitting around and all of a sudden they see the assassination. They walk back up, turn on the radio. The president's been shot. Turned off the TV, and all of a sudden, the phone rings. We doing okay, by the way? Everyone can hear me?
Yep.
Okay. The phone rings, and it's Chief Joe Conley, and he's calling at 102. It's very hard to believe nearly all of this for me. He gets a call and says, hey, the Secret Service and the FBI have requested you personally to come down and search for the assassin. We believe we have him trapped up on the 7th floor up near the roof. And why are they picking him? Well, according to this, because he's the only person that has a top secret clearance. So he gets into he's told to bring a ladder. He's told to bring heavy lights because they don't have any lights in there, right? The power had gone off was the story. So it's possible that the power going off, whether the power was back on or not, was an impetus for the reason to get the firefighter to the Texas School Book Depository. Because by the time they get there, they've already been searching for a half hour. They have plenty of lights. They have plenty of portable lights, plenty of searchlights. They have a ladder. So as they arrive, he's saying he was told to meet the Secret Service because they had requested him. And as we all know, there was no Secret Service inside the building. So it was some other, Treasury agents, ATF. I'm not sure they had the Bureau of Narcotics yet, but the Treasury Department would be one of those possibilities. Or it could have just been a group of intelligence officers who sort of had feet in both areas. So he gets there, he gets to the front door, they're escorted there, and they're met by another FBI agent. All of these FBI agents, whoever they are, he's calling them FBI agents, Secret Service, they all have submachine guns, locked and loaded, ready to go. And it says, he explained that he wanted them to provide, and he counters by saying, well, you know what? I need to bring one more fireman inside since it's going to be several pieces of equipment. He claims that the FBI asked him, who is this man? Does he have a top secret clearance? I told him no, but his name was Harry Combs. He did not have any clearance. So the agent then asked if I would vouch for him, which is pretty funny. I told him I would trust him with my life. He said, go get him. So then the story is that he goes back, he grabs Harry Combs, and they come inside the Texas School Book Depository. Well, if you search the video, you'll see somebody that's dressed in like a shirt, doesn't look like a fireman, dash into the building with a ladder. You'll also see a fireman, which is Warnock, running in with a set of fireman's helmet, fireman's jacket, draped over his shoulder, running in the door. Okay, so he then is assigned to an agent, and again, we've got people running up and down the stairs, and they're going to make it sound like they're the only ones here. So they get the floodlights, heavy extension cords, and a short ladder for later use. They're assigned to an agent who took them upstairs on the freight elevator. Okay. He explained what was about to happen. There was a cockloft, sort of a built-in sub area on the 7th floor, very steep set of wooden steps leading to it. They believe they had the assassin trapped up there. And so he brings his invisible friend Harry into this again. Harry and I were to set up our floodlights in the cock loft. We were to follow these 4 men up that were carrying submachine guns. And at the designated time, the agent down on the floor would plug in the cords. They suspected the assassin was hiding up there. He says, well, everything was going fine until we all eased up the stairs, guns ready, lights ready, nervous, tense, and I do mean tense. Suddenly a cock came from the other end of the cock loft. Guns clicked in readiness as they fell to the floor to shoot. Lights came on and a voice rang out, "Don't shoot, don't shoot. It's me." So it would have had to have been somebody who knew these agents, whoever they may be. If they are FBI, I haven't heard of any group of FBI guys up there in any of the things I've read with submachine guns by themselves running around. He says, Harry and I didn't wait. We already exited. They slid down the stairs faster than we ever moved. Then we saw what happened. Another agent who did not know what was about to happen found a ladder at the other end of the building with a hole in the ceiling to the roof, decided to climb up and investigate it. As he stuck his head up in the cock loft, dust got caught in his throat and he coughed. So what they're asking us to believe here is that the FBI is running this, but yet there was an FBI agent who had no idea that this was happening. Okay? So through all this excitement, we searched through various parts of the building, searching false ceilings with the agents to no avail. The agent then asked if Harry and I would like to go to the 6th floor where all the shooting had come from. He showed us where Lee Harvey Oswald, had stacked boxes neatly arranged. There was a lunch sack, potato chip sack, piece of wax paper, and some chicken bones lying in the area. He was prepared to stay for a while. Also, 3 empty shells were on the floor next to a window that was open slightly. Now, here's the part that's really, could not be true. They had already fingerprinted everything and sent the prints over some sort of small machine and were waiting for the report. Then a voice came over the small radio the agent was carrying, and they identified the assassin as Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, I thought that happened long before 120. I could be wrong. He lived in Dallas and he had been working at Depositary. Then another voice came on the radio saying a policeman had been clipped by someone as Oswald. We all started walking towards the stairs and freight elevator at the back of the building. I was talking to an agent and we were sort of looking around all the boxes. Then the agent looked at me and back at a stack of boxes that had a space between them. We looked down, and there was the rifle. We moved the boxes back gently enough for him to ease the rifle out. They immediately identified it by type, serial number, caliber. They fingerprinted, and he's claiming that the prints match Lee Harvey Oswald, which we know didn't happen, especially in real time. As we went downstairs, we were told that Lee Harvey Oswald had been apprehended. We gathered our equipment, thanked the agents in charge and the ones we worked with. We put it back in the salvage wagon. I looked back down the hill, and what a day it had been. Somebody then announced the president is dead. And that's his statement. Now, here's a picture of him right here. It was 1956 is when he became a fireman. I had looked back in the OSS files, and there are 2 Warnocks that are part of the OSS. And if anybody knows the OSS, they don't always use their real name. But there are 2 Warnocks in there. So whether it be parents, whether it be he got his top security clearance in the Korean War, I'm not sure, but that's the story he's telling. Now, here is a fire truck. There's a fire truck in the back of the building. here is that fire truck in color. And here's a bunch of people around. And if you look, you'll see people sitting kind of inside on the other one. And this one's kind of buttoned down now. They're very close, and we're to assume that maybe this is him right here or this is him right here. This is them coming out. This is in the back too. This is the same area. It's the Dallas Tech's building. This is from Discovery Channel. It's a film video capture of frame. And what's ridiculous about this is that they're in full gear. And this second person here is not only in full gear, he has his mask on and his face is completely covered. As if they were battling a fire. So what I am hypothesizing and just throwing out there as a distinct possibility for why nobody's ever been able to solve finding a shooter coming out is that perhaps the whole reason for bringing the fire department there was to get the shooter out as a fireman, which has been done in several, instances in the past. So this right here would be Warnock, and this person right here with his head down and his face covered, we're supposed to believe is Harry Combs. Now, why they would be coming out in full uniform with their helmets on and everything when there was no fire is beyond me, because that's not how they went in the building. Are you still with me?
Yeah.
Okay. If you want me to stop or take a break, please just say so.
Yeah, I mean,
So
do you think
here-
this is, are you about halfway through your presentation, do you think?
I am. I'm about to segue into the next part that's related, so this would be a good time for a break.
Okay, so I mean, there's a lot to unpack here on this first section. Should we just go and have a comfort break, grab a drink, that kind of thing, and reconvene in about 3 or 4 minutes?
That 5 minutes, that sounds great.
Okay, I'll pause the recording.
If they want to ask about what I've talked about already, that's fine.
Okay. All right. So look, thanks for that. So just in terms of kicking off the Q&A, can you just go back a bit and just explain your core position here before we get on to the second half? So, because
Sure.
you didn't give us an overview of where you think this is all going. So with respect to the sheriff's department, because you brought up ONI, you brought up the sheriffs, you brought up Harry Olson, you brought up the fire service.
And I'm about to bring up the Air Force. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're going to bring up some other characters. So what's your central position here, just to have a quick recap?
Sure. So, I think that why this entire operation is so difficult to nail down and make sense and for everybody to agree on is that, again, there were multiple groups. There was a group in the Air Force that was involved, and there was a group of naval intelligence. And they were both there for different reasons. The Air Force, the individuals who were there, this is a direct result of what happened in Cuba. And a lot of the people are not necessarily Cuban that were involved in the Bay of Pigs. For example, you have Rip Robertson and you have Grayston Lynch, who both were officers who were in charge of the 2 boats that brought in all of the Cubans who were going to supposedly liberate Cuba. Rip Robertson ends up in, a horrible prison for 18 months. You have a group of all of these Cubans that you've trained who now have nothing to do. Even after the first Bay of Pigs, they were promised again that there would be another assassination attempt. Robert Kennedy was running this one. Didn't happen. So you had a lot of people that felt that they were traitors, right? And not just the old story about the air cover, but deeper than that, but this isn't the time or place to go into it. But so you had this group of people, and those people will continue to show up throughout the 60s. They're present at the RFK assassination. And in 1970, when Nixon comes into power, all of them form the base of is what becomes Bunsen. And I don't know how many people out there know who Bunsen is, but before the DEA, you had the Bureau of Narcotics. Well, when Earl Bud Crow came in with Nixon, he was tasked with coming up with a group of people within the DEA that would be in charge. They would be both CIA and they would work for the Nixon administration and the government. And what their job was, on paper, was to go around and find all the heroin dealers internationally and terminate them. But the reality of what they participated in were most of the killings in 75, 76, 77 of the individuals who were going to testify in the House assassinations investigations. And so they continue to show up. And so this is not something that's one event, two events, three events. It's an ongoing event for 2 decades.
Okay.
Now,
Okay, so
yeah.
just to intervene there. Okay, so that you've gone sort of macro there. That's a bigger picture issue, but just specifically with respect to the first half of your talk, right? You've talked about the sheriffs, deputy sheriffs' involvement. They were stood down by Decker. They were on the corner of Main and Houston. They're running over to the Knoll and the railway yards, and then they are diverted back to the TSBD. And you specifically mentioned Harry Weatherford, and we know there is a photograph of him on the annex roof. He's dropped off from the second floor window, west side,
Right,
to that roof. Can you just give us a bit more color in terms of what you think his role is on the day?
Well, there's a lot of people that think he is the shooter, but the one thing that you see with him is that he's Decker's most trusted guy to get things taken care of. So as we're going to get into, the next event that happens is this Larry Floor
event.
arrest, maiden arrest, and it's what people think. Floor comes from a different direction, and Harry Weatherford's the one that calls him over. They have a conversation.
Yeah.
Floor walks away, and then he's arrested and he's brought down. But it's Weatherford that brings him down to the sheriff's department and sits and watches while his statement is read.
Okay.
Then Weatherford is told, he gives an address. Then he's told to go over to Ruth Payne's house. One of the individuals at Ruth Payne's house that is tasked with getting, the rifle bag. He physically sees and picks up the black book that has all of his questions in it, or all of the phone numbers that Oswald has. And he makes a point to be the only one who stays with Ruth Payne while everyone else goes into the garage to go find the little pieces of the puzzle that make it, a slam dunk about Oswald.
Okay, so we can develop all this. I just in the interest of time, we can develop all of this, but you're leaning towards him being a bad apple. That's
absolutely, no question.
Okay.
And
all right,
okay. So all of these guys have ties. They all have ties. They were all military, and they have ties in Texas to these very important people. And you have people that that were military intelligence that later worked within the fire department, the police department. Some of them stay on. And what's important for everyone to understand, and Fletcher Prouty does a great job of explaining this, is that the CIA had a patience level. They had a plan from the beginning to get their people from the military, or their people into the military, into the Air Force, and in the agricultural department, in the Treasury Department. And to patiently wait 6-7 years until they become the assistant directors or the directors, so that they're when they need to, put the kibosh on things.
Okay, all right. Just again, in the interest of time. So Harry Olsen, you meant as well. I mean, he's a great character. Nancy, I believe, has interviewed him back in the day. He's very much a person of interest, particularly the dog and pony story around Oak Cliff. He features heavily. Very briefly, what do you see his role in this?
So I'm not positive what his role was, but he played a role of just subterfuge. But what's important that I don't know if anyone knows, his family owned the largest boot company in Texas, every president, everybody that was anybody, wore the Olsen Stetzer boots. And so the family was very well connected. And in those days, a son from a prominent family was picked for things because they trusted him. And it happened time and time again. So I think that even though he was not the right person, he had his foot in certain areas, and I think he was incompetent. I think he was, you know, obviously he was corrupt. Obviously he was committing crimes himself, right? He knew Ruby. He got kicked out once, and then shortly after the assassination, they ran him out of town again. So what exactly he did for that to happen, I'm not sure. I'm not the expert on that, but he's definitely somebody who played a role of creating confusion, conflict, and he's on the CIA's. You know, there's a file. I'll include it so that you can post it later. But the CIA has a file that shows minute by minute where everybody was. It analyzes it with handwritten notes, who's lying, who doesn't make sense, what elevator they took, where they were at any position, what floors they went to. It's worth a read. It's about 22 pages long, but they developed their own spreadsheet. And so it, you know, you could see the different movements in there, but I'm not an expert on Harry Olsen. Somebody else could be the expert, but he certainly was a corrupt individual who played a role of sort of straddling in and, you know, working with Ruby, working with crime families because he was a criminal.
No, that's fair enough. I mean, I might be adjusted on this, but I believe that he went off the record at some point during his testimony before the Warren Commission as well. And the final question I had just on the first section before I give other people the opportunity to speak is, I'm slightly confused on the Leslie Warnock statement. Who was it made for?
It was made, that's interesting because it wasn't signed, just like the sheriff's, deputy sheriff statements weren't signed, so they could always make them. But it was for, I believe it was for Decker as well.
That's the nice guy to give you.
Yeah.
Here's
but
one.
that was found. I found that in the same place that Bill found his document. It's the Texas History website.
Okay.
And
I mean, it's not. There's nothing official on that document on the slide.
Right.
So
Right.
I was just trying to clarify who it was made for, when, because it's there's an element of it that does read like a piece of fiction, as you say.
Yeah, but the timeline's not accurate at all. But
No.
I think I think the purpose for writing it was to give a reason to be there, to try to explain to people that, hey, we were there to pull off this operation.
Yeah.
And I think that anybody that's followed this would realize that if he's called at 1:02 p.m., a lot of everything's already happened. It's the same thing like Captain Westbrook. Captain Westbrook doesn't show up until after 1 o'clock either. He's there for a brief moment, then he's gone. So, and he walked there to get there. So, I don't buy his story. I think he's creating after the fact a reason he was there. And I think that the reason that they called to begin with, that they could say, is because the power went out. Even though
they needed lights to search maybe some of these more difficult spaces. But as we know, you've got police officers that already had lights.
Right. They were up there with these searchlights. There were lights that were lined up, and there were lights that were brought from the sheriff's department right down the road. So it makes no sense that you would have cords that would plug into a fire truck that would have to go up to the 7th floor. And I don't believe that those people that had the submachine guns were FBI agents either.
No, I mean that's no one. We've never heard submachine guns before. That's for sure.
No.
All right.
Well, that was the group that was tasked with getting the shooter out of the building.
No, I think I mean that came across very clearly that if he's gone in with an extra uniform, and then there's somebody that's come out with full kit on, including the mask, then
Yeah.
that's an interesting way of getting somebody out of the building, whoever that person
Right,
is.
and that's been used in Hollywood several times too, right? In
Yeah,
movies.
yeah. Oh no, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I just wanted to clarify those things. Can I just ask the floor if anybody has any questions on that first section?
Yes, I'd like to speak.
Yes, go ahead, Bill.
Yes, I was reading the letter from Nancy Weiford. I kind of read through it kind of hurriedly, and I made an error during my reading of it. I said that Judy Johnson was the woman on the phone on the second floor. That was not correct. Actually, Geneva Hine did not know who that person was that was on the phone on the second floor shortly after the electricity came on.
Right, she heard the voice. Yeah.
Just heard the voice.
Right.
So I wanted to make that correction. And I think where Peter's going with this is that that we have, like, I believe, two men that were seen on the upper floor. One was in a brown suit coat, and the other one had blonde hair and like a white shirt. The man with the blonde hair and the white shirt was armed with a gun that was seen by Carolyn Walter on the street. And I believe my research is that the man in the brown suit coat came down the elevator during that point in time when the electricity was turned on, and he went out the back door. And I think what Peter's point is that the other man had to get out. Maybe for some reason he had to stay to clean the area or plant evidence, but he delayed his escape, and he needed some way to get out.
He would have been obvious. He would have been too obvious. The way he was dressed. He didn't belong there.
Yeah, it was too obvious. And so Peter's explaining how this other man was able to escape.
Yeah. And there's footage of what may be the first man you're talking about walking, where the green station wagon shows up right off the bat, followed by the termite truck. But again, I don't want to digress too much, but Neil and I have, I've shared that with him, and you could see that through the Looking Glass, the latest Oliver Stone movie, where they show a brief 10-second clip right after the assassination of all these people rushing away, and you see this gentleman in the brown suit with another top coat, different color, over his arm, and he's walking in the wrong direction very casually. So you catch his eye, and as he's walking, here comes the green station wagon, who, by the way, Ruth Payne's station wagon was green. So I believe that there's two. There was the Rambler that comes later, the white one in the front. But this particular one here, it looks like it's being driven by a large African-American or Cuban man. It looks like that there's somebody in the middle of that station wagon in a white t-shirt, and it looks like in the back, tearing up just a little bit, appears to be a policeman with a hat. Now, I'm not positive, but that's my analysis when I take it frame by frame by frame.
Okay. All right. Okay, so let's go to the floor. Pete, you've got a question.
Yeah, both Peter and Bill have just touched on these things. I'm quoting from Ian Griggs's manuscript. I did raise these at Canterbury, but there's a Dallas police sergeant, Sergeant Flush, and he was one of the early Dallas police officers on the 6th floor of the school book depository for the initial search. and he gave a statement. He said that that he noticed members of the Dallas Sheriff's Office, the Dallas Police Department, alcohol and tobacco,
There you
the
go.
the FBI, and federal game wardens
Huh.
also involved in the search. I mean, who these guys were,
Right.
nobody knows. I know they took the names of the workers who were in the building, but I don't think anybody took any names of all these different guys that were on the 6th floor.
Yeah.
And something for Bill there as well. Where am I? Yeah, a Dallas patrolman, William E. Barker. He was quoted in the Dallas Times Herald. And his statement, he said, "I saw workers in the Texas School Book Depository knocking on the window on the 3rd floor. And they were pointing to a man wearing horn-rimmed glasses, a plaid jacket, and raincoat. The officer immediately arrested the man and took him to Bill Decker's office. He was later released," unquote.
I believe that's Floor. Is that for the Dallas Tex building? Or there's
No,
something-
this is the School Book Depository.
Okay, so there was those people that thought that one of the gentlemen came because it was, I think he was misquoted, but you could clearly see if it is Larry Floor or if it is Braden, I think they're originally coming from the Del Tex, but Floor is arrested near the School Book Depository. And it is kind of ambiguous because there's two versions, I think, where some people thought that he was up in the depository, but my research shows that if that's who you're talking about, could be somebody completely different, that they came from the Dallas Tex building.
It sounds like Barker is talking about people on the 3rd floor of the Texas School Book Depository. So it sounds as though Barker is outside that building to be able to see the workers on the 3rd floor, and pointing to a man wearing horn-rimmed glasses, a plaid jacket, and a raincoat, whether the raincoat's over his arm or whatever.
Well,
And
that's exactly.
yeah, so Barker said he took the man, he arrested him and took the man to Decker's office, but he was later released. Who he was, again, no names, no pack drill.
Yeah, and there could have been somebody outside of the people that I'm thinking that he's talking about, but the two people, Braden and Floor, they actually said in their statements that they were on the 3rd floor, but of a different building, trying to make a phone call. They both were going up to the 3rd floor for the same reason, to make a phone call, and they were spotted when they were up there. And so, yeah, in the second half, real quick here, when I start, I'm going to demonstrate that through a video and through the statements. But Harry Weatherford was the one who eventually took Larry Floor down to the office and stayed with him while he gave the deposition.
Okay.
So I don't know if anybody else has anything on that, but yeah, it could be a completely different person that I'm not aware of.
Okay, great question, Pete. Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to ask a question at this stage? No. Okay. All right. Do you want to press?
Neil,
Yes.
I'm going to have to drop out of this. Very interesting discussion here, or what Peter's telling us, but I guess I need things to do.
Okay.
So is there any questions that anybody wants to ask me before I go?
Yeah, I think, okay. So obviously Bill's done a lot of other research, as you know, not just what he talked about today. So whilst he's here, does anybody have any questions at all that you'd like? Nancy, you got anything you want to talk about?
No, thanks.
No? Okay.
Go over to Bill's site and read the articles. They're lengthy. They're very groundbreaking. They're very specific, and they're the beginning of a theme that we're going to be showing over the next year.
Just before you go, Bill, Gary, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, Bill,
Yes.
I think you wrote about at some point the safe house at the end of the runway at Love Field.
Oh, yes.
So John Williams and I and a couple other people visited that about 10 years ago, and the house was gone. We could decipher the address, but the runway had been extended. Now, it just
Okay.
crossed my mind listening that you're talking about a third assassination location. Now, a safe house you wouldn't think would be a place an assassin would get up on the roof and shoot, but it could be there was a building at the end of the runway, and they would have, since Air Force One wouldn't be stopping at a terminal, it would be off someplace on the airport grounds. But at any rate, having said that, you looked at Earl Goltz's evidence of an address and a couch sitting on the berm of that house at the end of the runway. Could you just briefly describe how that fits into the scenarios in Wisconsin that you researched?
Yes. I read a FBI report and newspaper accounts of a barber in Sparta, Wisconsin. I contacted him and interviewed him, and he was telling me about a friend of his, Philip Hemlock, who was in Dallas at that time, and he lived in that, I believe, in that house where we're talking about. And so I think that's a very interesting idea, that maybe that's another spot where, in case other ambush sites fell through, they have at least that spot to finish the job. So if you have any pictures of that, maybe you could send it to my email address of that area.
Yeah, I don't know that we were proficient with our cell phones in those days to come up with that. But,
Okay.
at any rate, there was an address in the couch that Goltz found, right?
Exactly. And there was a note on it. I forget what the note said, but some of it was redacted. But it had, I think it was something about meeting somewhere in that area. I don't have that information to refresh my memory at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Bill, just before you go, many years ago, I did read the article, which was the basis of this talk today, that, the spider's web at the Trade Mart. And I wanted to know whether you could make that available to us, because I got it from Jim Fetz's site, and his persona non grata now, and I think that site is no longer in existence.
Right. So yes, I could make that available. I'll email it to you.
Yeah.
You can pass it on to everybody else.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful if you could just email it in PDF form or something like that, and I'll send it out to the whole group, because there's so much more detail on that.
Yeah, and there's a great article. I don't know if it's the same one, Bill, that talks about Capehart, a fascinating topic that is yet to be resolved.
Okay. And also, with Nancy's permission, I'd like to email you her letter to me, or email. It's fascinating, very informative. I'm sorry I made a mistake when I read it, but I'd like to pass that on too.
Is that okay, Nancy?
Yes, that's fine with me. You can distribute it to everybody. Neil?
Okay,
Okay, thank you. All right, Bill, look, that was great stuff. Hope to have you back some point in the
thank
future.
you.
Okay,
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
no worries.
Nice to
Take
meet
care.
you. We'll talk soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, so Peter, do you want to press on
Sure.
part 2 and share the screen again, please?
Absolutely. So let's see. So, are we all here? We're looking at Larry Floor, Harry Weatherford, down at the sheriff's station.
Yeah,
Let's see.
go to slideshow view to make it a bit bigger, please.
Yep. Okay. Larry Floor. Larry Floor is a very interesting individual. So his story, of course, is that he was eating at a barbecue place on Pacific Avenue. And like most of the intelligence officers out there, you know, like Powell and stuff, they don't seem to remember the name where they were at, what, you know, who they interviewed, what it went on. It's very interesting, but he doesn't remember the name of it, but he was there with a Richard Bartholomew of all people, right? Or the Bartholomew, who worked at the National Bank of Commerce. Now, Floor is still alive today. And I don't believe, I just want to categorically state that I don't believe that he shot anybody or was necessarily responsible for a crime. But as you listen to this story that I'm about to tell you about him, there's a lot that doesn't make sense. He has repeatedly throughout his days, whenever this subject comes up, he immediately tells people to talk to his attorney, that he has no comment. So I found out, you know, quite a few interesting things about Larry Floor, including that his original father was a colonel and was in George Patton's outfit. He has a brother who was a Marine lieutenant colonel who was just absolutely stellar career. So he comes from a military background. And what's fascinating about him is that Larry Floor himself was Air Force. And as you'll see in a moment, he came into the Air Force there in Texas, in the area of Dallas, as a tactical ground refueling group, part of that team, which is a team that went far and wide throughout the world and was only formed in the summer of 1962. So he comes in August 62. And as you'll see, he's promoted quite rapidly. And a week to 10 days before the assassination, he's promoted again to a sergeant. There's not much else about his career in the Air Force other than 2 weeks after the RFK assassination, he retires. And then he goes and he becomes a financial person, working in banking, and becomes quite successful. But there's a lot of interesting things about him that make me question whether or not that's even Larry Floor. I'll just start there. So he tells the story of that he was walking with his friend. They had a grilled cheese sandwich, and then they heard on the radio, like a lot of these people do, oh, that the president's been shot. And so he decides to go walk on the railroad tracks at Pacific and Houston Street. I was walking parallel to some of the tracks, and there were quite a few other people walking in the same direction. I stopped on the east side of Houston Street, across the street from the Texas School Book Depository. I stood there for a few minutes, and then a lady that was standing next to me, I asked her where there was a telephone. Just like Powell, just like Braden, same story. We got to get to a payphone, right? She said that there's only one payphone and that it's in the county records building. She said that there were a lot of phones on the third floor that he was standing in front of. So is he standing in front of the Texas Public Depository? Is he standing in front of the Daltex building? That right there can be open for interpretation. But as you'll see in a video, it's very clear where he comes from prior to walking towards the school book depository. So again, she says, just go up to the third floor and call. So his story is he rides up the elevator, gets off on the third floor. All the lines were busy or something to that effect is what he says. So he stood there for a minute and a fellow walked up to him, said, hey, he told me I couldn't use the phone. So he walked back down, rode the elevator, and as soon as he got out of the lobby, he walked outside and they pointed out to him that, hey, this person was on the third floor. And that man said, arrest this man. So at no time, he says, did I see anyone leaving the building, the Texas School Book Depository, while I was across the street from it. So that's Larry Floor, and this is Harry Weatherford. Even though Harry's story is he immediately goes to Decker's office and he's handed a piece of paper to go down to Ruth Payne's house, he makes a very specific point to take Weatherford down and watch his statement being read. If you look here, these are part of the arrests. And so we have Jim Braden, Larry Floor, William Sharp. These are people that were there saying their position was the Daltex building. So again, it can get a little confusing, but this is the official record. Braden's doing the same thing, right? And that's Eugene Bradley. Braden had just changed his name. It's Bradeen, Eugene Hale, whatever you want to call him. He's already a convicted murderer, just a long track record of fraud. He's in the oil industry. He knows a lot of people, and all he does is show them a credit card as his ID, tells them, the story that we all know. And he's only been in town for 2 days. And so then he's just sort of let go. We don't really know what happens to him until 1967, early 68, where Garrison starts his trying to get his witnesses together, and he tries to extradite Jim Braden from California, and Reagan won't allow it. And next thing you hear, at the RFK assassination, just a couple blocks away, they pick up Jim Braden after the shooting. Not saying he was involved, but it's just interesting that, these people just happen to be at these events. Larry Floor was arrested, detained for behaving in a suspicious manner, but the building that he was supposedly in front of when he was arrested, he was first approached by, as he was walking across the street, as we'll show in a moment, he was first approached by Weatherford. And then Weatherford talked to him for a little bit, and then he walked away towards the building, and then he was arrested. With his horn-rimmed glasses, with his long raincoat, and with a plaid three-piece suit underneath. Now, he, in 1958, just came to Highland High School into Dallas. So he goes from being a junior to a senior. And I've pulled up the high school yearbooks. And what he looks like as a junior without glasses, and what he looks like as a senior with glasses, he looks like a completely different person, much older. And I actually found his signature in the, writing over his name in the yearbook. And it does not match. It's close, but it doesn't match at all. It's very easy to see that the letters go different directions of his signature. So it even says in the yearbook that he just transferred from another school. So again, there were two dads, one mom, And so depending on when you were born, you still were a floor, but you had a different father, and that's where the name Hubert comes in. This is interesting. And this is the part that really begs and requires somebody to come up with a logical explanation. You see here, this file about Lawrence Floor was not released until 2022. So all the times they released thousands of documents throughout all the different presidencies, this particular document was kept for whatever reason, was too sensitive to be released until late in 2022. And what it is, this Jack Moriarty here guy and Brady Sorrell, both of these people, especially Jack Moriarty, you could find him involved slightly in the JFK assassination as an investigator. Here he is. This is 1978. This is the House Assassination Committee asking for documentation right here, HSA, on Mary Floor. So here's the report from Jack Moriarty, the Pentagon, and he viewed the Air Force file, and he was accompanied by a secretary during the inspection of the file, so he wasn't allowed to go review it on his own. He had to be accompanied. And what it says is that he enlisted in the Air Force on 8/30/62 in Dallas for a period of 6 years. He received an honorable discharge 8/29/68 to almost 3 months, I guess here, a little less than 3 months after the RFK assassination. His assignment as a member of the 136th Air Refueling Group, Texas. It's a tactical unit, though. It doesn't say it here. And he was in the weekend. It was a part-time. So it says here that he worked basically on the weekends. But the record goes on to reflect he was born in 1940, lived with his mother. His father's deceased. They failed to, acknowledge that what his father actually did, a colonel. He attended local schools, ultimately graduating with a BBA in accounting in 62. So he's a fresh out there. Aside from basic training, he received no special education while he was assigned to the Air Refueling Group, TAC, Texas ANG, in Dallas, Texas. I believe he was at the airport when Kennedy came in. It was part of his job. So it lists who he's married to. And if you notice here, so just a few weeks before the assassination, he's promoted to a Airman 3rd class, which, again, nothing nefarious about that. I'm not accusing him of doing anything, but I am wondering out loud why this file would be kept as something that was so sensitive. So when you look at the end, it says here he was mostly on the weekends. When you look at the end, it says quite tellingly that no photos exist in this file, which, is not really believable that a military file wouldn't have a photo of somebody. It says he has to wear glasses. You see how bad his vision is here. And so the idea that as a junior in high school, he wouldn't wear glasses, but as a senior, he would, doesn't make sense. He has a 6-inch scar in his inner left ear. And then they mucked up the thing by saying his hair is blue. Okay. Now, go back. Let's see. I want to share a video now of him. So, can you see this video?
Yeah.
Okay, you see it? All right. So, this is after. So they're making it appear as if he just came out of the building here. And they're pointing up at the building and he's arrested right here. This is long after he came out, long after he walked in the middle of the street in a short time after he had a conversation with Harry Weatherford. What you're going to see here in a moment is one of the gentlemen who I believe is an intelligence officer, one of those 8 or 9 people that I showed earlier that was standing on the steps of the Dealey Plaza waiting for Fritz to show up, and he was the one that had his hand over his face. He has a bulge in his pocket, which could be a radio, which could be a camera. I'm not sure, but he's dressed like, you know, an intelligence officer as far as I'm concerned, and that's what he looks like. And if you notice this video, as soon as they search floor, he's going to walk forward. He's going to point right to that person. That person is going to say something to him, and then he's going to walk off. And you'll see several other people who have a very concerned look on their face. And one of them is standing 4 or 5 feet from Robert Kennedy when he's assassinated. And his name is Richard Lubick, Dick Lubick, who made a fortune after the RFK assassination as the partner of Dick Clark in about 12 cable companies worldwide. And so at this point, Dick Lubick had just finished, Richard Lubick, setting up a nationwide communication system for the first trucking company, which was a mafia-based trucking company, Consolidated, like CF, I think is what they were called. And he was working for Time as somebody who was helping build their original cable network. So he's somebody that's connected, and I'll point him out to you. And the reason that he's at the RFK, this is Dick Lubick, he tells the detectives when he's interviewed, was to warn RFK that he was about to be assassinated. So he says, I'm running in. That's why I was in the pantry to go up and tell him, but I was too late. Well, then he goes on to talk about the Garrison investigation, how close he is to Jaffe, how close he is to Garrison, that he's working with Garrison to find out information about Braden, to find out information about a couple other characters who were living in California at the time. So Dick Lubick is a very interesting person, and in about a week or so on my YouTube channel, which is called The Ties That Bind, that content will go up there, and you'll be able to see all of the individuals who tie in JFK assassination directly. So here we go.
Secret Service agents have just taken a man who appears to be
Okay, so now he's pointing,
about 45 years of age into custody.
and there he is. That's the gentleman right here, who's one of the 8 or 9 people standing on the steps, part of the script, waiting for Fritz to show up so that they could all run into the building together. And when I'm done here, I'll just show you that picture once again. You see the bulge in his pocket. Now I'm not saying this is Powell, but I know that Powell had either a radio or a camera in his pocket. And Powell was somebody who, you know, got trapped, he claims, inside the Texas School Book Depository. And just like Braden, just like Floor, he was looking for a telephone, ironically. So you could see the close contact here. He said something to him. Now, right there, that's Dick Lubick. Right there. And there's one other gentleman that's, he's not in this video, but he's one of the first people that arrives when Robert Kennedy is down on the ground. He's one of the first people that's holding his head, and he's looking up and he's smiling. Somebody who looks exactly like Larry Floor looks, and it's 5 years later, is in the pantry and is actively creating chaos, is working with a couple Cubans, and is handed something that he puts into his pocket. He's not the least bit worried about shots being fired all around him. He's sitting with Dick Tuck. If anyone knows Dick Tuck, he's a very famous agent provocateur. So good at what he did that Nixon tried to hire him. And so those two people are standing next together, and he's this, and I'm not saying it's Larry Floor, but the person who looks like him is also smiling back at the camera, knowing that he's shot. So here we go.
The man, as we said,
So here,
25 years old, denied any knowledge of the shooting. He said that he had gone to the depository.
now look here. There's already a fire truck. There's already a fire truck here.
The telephone. Other radio reports filtering in there at this time indicate that officers also have another suspect that they are checking.
So that's Larry Floor. They take him down to the station. And so close both of these here. Let's back to this guy. Oh, where are we at? Let's see. Here. I'll get it back in just a second. Okay, so now I'm just going to conclude with throwing out some individuals who I was told to look for, because they were involved, like I said, directly into Cuba, and it's a group of people that stayed together that had a lot of vengeance. And so David Christ's real name, and this photo here is taken on the left, is taken, you know, a long time before the one on the right. But his alias is David Carswell, who is in the investigation of the JFK assassination. You can find his name in multiple places. What's going on here is he's standing along with, I mean, I don't think this is the sidewalk where the bullet hit the sidewalk. I think they're looking for something in the grass, but it could be. Maybe somebody knows better than I do. But you notice they're pointing back, the officer's pointing back to where he thinks the shot came from. And so this is either the sidewalk where it nicked a piece, or if you see by digging up here, perhaps somebody saw a bullet hit the grass and it was picked up, but we don't really know what happened to that bullet. We know who supposedly brought it down, but we don't know exactly what happened as far as the chain of custody. So I believe that it's possible that this person right here is Christ, aka David Carswell, who would have just been released from a Cuban prison, I believe, around February or March of 1963. So then I was told to look for Frank Sturgis, and I was also told, because as you'll see on my YouTube channel about the people in the pantry, I actually found where David Morales is, and it's not inside the Ambassador Hotel, as has been, you know, hashed out and shown not to be correct. He's actually over standing at the hospital when they're reading the news that Robert Kennedy's dead. And how this person confirmed that was to tell me to look at the watch, that this group of individuals had a watch that was common with them. It was this gold with a very tight, thin band. And so I looked for that. And this photo here, I believe, is the impetus for the JFK movie, when the clouds come in and it's dark. So you have who could be Frank Sturgis, and I'll show you a picture of what he looked like in just a moment. You have a second person right here, which is Harris, who was an assassin. We'll show you a picture of him as well. He was a CIA assassin. He was in Vietnam, etc. And then, I'm not going to speculate, but this gentleman right here looks familiar. And I'm not going to, try to say who he is or claim that he's anybody. But these individuals look very much like those individuals. Now, if you go to Bill Weston's website and you read our article about the George Wallace assassination attempt, this woman right here features prominently. She's in 3 of the photos, not too far from where the shooting takes place in the crowd. She's also in the Ambassador Hotel, hooping and hollering and laughing, celebrating when she finds out that RFK is shot. So I'm not sure who she is, but I would venture to guess that this gentleman right here may look familiar to people. And that this group right here, if you look at their signs, you look at their flags, they're not, you know, they may say welcome to Big D, but no, they're not supporters of Kennedy. So here it says Frank Sturgis, obviously Frank Furioni was his name as well. He was involved in Watergate. He was connected, and then here's Fetzer saying this, right? So I don't want to use this as the source, but he had ties to the mafia. And I am told unequivocally that he was there. Whether he was involved in shooting or not is another story. But I'm told by somebody whose father was there that he was there. So this is just shortly, this is maybe a couple years later, but this is what he looked like just a couple years later. And you see the watch right here. You see the watch. You see it's on the left hand. And this is what I'm told is the giveaway. If you need to identify somebody, you'll find the watch that they wore. It was symbolic of what happened at the Bay of Pigs. Over here is I.W. Harper. Here he is with a very famous, very scary individual, Robert K. Brown, who ends up in LA, and it's, you know, an assassin. Same thing here with Harper. And Harper, he won the Intelligence Medal of Merit. He worked for the CIA until 75, when you know, everybody who was involved in all these things could no longer work for the CIA or be involved because of the press coverage. Some of them had to up and die. Up and die is when you fake your death, you're relocated, you never get to see your family again. Jerry Hemming talks about it quite prominently. And there's an individual who was involved in all of this who did have to up and die in the early 70s. So this is Harris. And this is when he's very young. This is when he's in, you know, he lasts all the way into the, they say 75, but this is him at the in Central America. So I have a feeling that maybe directly with the CIA, but then he became a soldier of fortune, just like Robert K. Brown and many of them as well. Okay. Now, these 2 photos here come from the Chisholms. And the Chisholms were the African-American family that was on the lawn with their baby. Here they are down here at the station, along with Netzer, who's being interviewed. And this is Virgie. She works at the Texas School Book Depository. Virgie Rackus, is that who it is? Without me having to go to my notes.
Yeah, it's something like that.
Yeah. So like Virgie Rackus, she's been interviewed.
Virgie Rackley.
Thank you very much. I apologize for mispronouncing the name. And over here, waiting for all of this, is Larry Flora. So the Chisholms in their obituary write some interesting things about how earlier that the husband was tackled by a Secret Service person, thrown to the ground hard. And the running around right here is interesting, but it's a large family, and there are some Chisholms who were FBI informants later in the 60s around the MLK and around the Malcolm X scene, if you will. Whether they're related or not, I don't know, but it's a large family, and they if you get a chance to look at their obituary, it's quite revealing what they say. And so that's they provided the pictures. So then you also have the first head of Bunsen in the early 70s, who's Lucien Conin. And of course, he hires Rip Robertson, he hires Grayston Lynch, he hires just about any Cuban that he knows that could be trusted, who have the unique position of working for, you know, the Treasury Department, but also one foot in the CIA, because they have carte blanche to go out and murder, quote unquote, international drug dealers. But I am told, and I'm not going to name names or anything right here because it'll take too long, but what I'm told is they were involved specifically in knocking off a lot of the witnesses who were about to testify at a couple of the different House assassination committees. So here is Lucien Conin, 64, right? That's what he looked like. And now, and anybody who's seen the pictures could see somebody who looks exactly like Lucien Conin standing, you know, real close to Kennedy's limousine as he walks by, and somebody saluting him with the cap. They say that might be Rip Robertson. I'm not sure, but he's definitely there. So that's over on, you know, the Army, Air Force, one foot in the CIA side. And then you have this gentleman right here, Captain David Soy, who up until the late 50s or the mid 50s to the late 50s was the commander of the Dallas Naval Air Station. He was ONI. He had an incredible career. If you read about it, he was like, if we look over here, if you read about his career, then all of a sudden it just mentions briefly, oh, when President Kennedy was fatally shot, he was sitting in a car waiting for the presidential motorcade to pass the school depository. So I believe that he may have been parallel to Elm Street when they're coming down the straightaway, like parallel to the grassy knoll on the other side, where the cars were going the opposite direction. They were kind of backed up. There's a truck there with a bunch of people in it. And I believe one of his cars, or one of them is his car, kind of like up on the grass, a little bit above. I cannot verify that. I'm welcome if anybody has any information on where his car may have been, but it has to be past the Texas School Book Depository, because it says he was sitting waiting for it to pass it. So the only other possibility would be that he was over somewhere where it made the left on Houston, or he was back behind like the pergola on the lawn there off to the side. But I'm not saying that he was a shooter, but I am saying that it's just fascinating that the former head of the ONI, somebody who was one of the, you know, people who created the Blue Angels, was all over the world as far as wars. He comes from both California. He was in charge out in San Diego for a long time here at the Naval Medical Facility. And then he was very active in Asia. He was just all over the place, right? And he left in about 57 or 58. But here he is back sitting, needed to be there to watch the president go by, you know, in your car. So that's kind of odd as far as I'm concerned. Here is one last interesting take. If you notice these two young men here, They kind of have what looks like a high school marching band uniform on. When the shooting happens, they're right here. And this gentleman here who's walking away appears to kind of be behind them, and they're kind of maybe obstructing anybody being able to see him back there. There are those who think a shot came from that direction. And when the shot happens, this gentleman goes this way, and the two boys run immediately over to the picket fence. But the older one, if you look later, he runs out like he's coming down the steps. He's not, but he's like almost coming down the steps of the Texas School Book Depository in a very brisk fashion, running right in front of it, and then stops, turns around, and he's like hanging out by a motorcycle watching. Somebody has postulated that, and I'm not supporting this position because I don't know enough, but I have seen an interview with Tippett's wife and his children where it appears that one of the children is wearing almost the same outfit. So I have heard somebody say that perhaps Tippett was back here, but I'm not taking that position. I just think that these two individuals, if you watch them, you'll see that it doesn't look right. Sure, go ahead. It just doesn't add up.
I mean,
Nor does-
it's pure. Just a couple of questions before I open to the floor. I can see that there is one question. You talked about Larry Flora not being Larry Flora, I the person who we think it is. Am I right that some people thought that the guy with the dark hair and the glasses is Ted Shackley? Is that right?
I've heard people say that.
Yeah.
It's not. It's, well, as far as I'm concerned, it's not Ted Shackley, but the person that I think it may be, his last name's Wilson. His first name's Jim. And he is he's a person who worked with the CIA. He was a reporter for UPI. AP was down in Cuba, and then later worked for CBS and gets caught up with Mitch Warmel, Roland Massafar, and is involved in smuggling massive weapons down and filming for CBS the attempted assassination in both Haiti and the Dominican Republic that were both thwarted because Wilson notified the CIA that it was going on. He later goes to Vietnam and is embedded with an intelligence unit giving leaflets. There's a book written about him called The Cat from Hue. His father was somebody who was intelligence officer. And so I've got him specifically as a person of interest by the FBI in the RFK assassination, but I could never find him in the Kennedy assassination until about 3 weeks ago, when I found a letter that the FBI put in. You could find these most fascinating stuff in what they call the kook files, the people that call in that they try to sound crazy. And this guy, Wilson, Jim Wilson, calls Jacqueline Kennedy's mother, the Auchincloss. And he lived that time very close to Robert Kennedy. He was like his neighbor. And so they knew the Auchinclosses. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. If I'm not, I apologize. But there is a long transcript where he calls in to her. She calls the FBI and says that he's saying that Bobby needs to get involved now. That the assassination of Oswald was set up. He talks about the Redbird Airport, the person that got away. This is long before anyone's talking about it. And so the higher up at the FBI takes over this thing and says to Miss Auchincloss, if he calls again, he's probably just a kook, but if he calls again, give him JW474, which is a back number to the White House, and tell him to ask for Steve. Okay, so he's obviously known who he is, but that's the first time that I see him involved there. There's also a floor Joe, who incredibly enough worked for Jack Ruby and Jack Ruby's sister, cleaning up the nightclubs. And he somehow gets, just like this floor here, he's like interviewed, but his interview doesn't really get into the Warren Commission, but you could find it. And if anyone's interested, I can give it to Neil and you can post it. So you have a whole family of floors, you know, who are in the military. You have Larry Floor, who the government decides that innocuous file that I read to you must be kept. It's one of the last ones, and it's it's released at the very end of 2022. So what else besides the fact that he worked for the Air Force would they be hiding about him? I mean, the fact that there's a photo in his file, which to me raises a red flag, and the picture of him as a high school student is not correct. So I question.
So you mentioned actually, didn't you, that you thought he was at the airport at Love Field?
Yes, and so I'll try to find a clearer picture, but one of the individuals is an African American gentleman next to him, and I'm not sure who he is, but there is one at the Texas School of Depositary that was only hired 6 weeks before, or he had already been hired for a while, and they don't even have his home address in the files. There's no house for him, which I think is odd how you would hire somebody that doesn't have an address.
He's standing next to Flora at Love Field. Is that what you're saying?
I believe so, but I'm not going to say that that's one of the people there.
Yeah.
But I have a strong suspicion, because the horn rim glasses looks the same, and that the fact that if Flora was in the ground refueling for the tactical unit, he would be there when Air Force One came in. That would be one of their jobs.
Okay.
Specific.
All right. Well, look, I know Paul Cummings wants to raise a question, which I'm going to go to in a minute. Bart joined the call very late. So he's on the naughty steps, the naughty TSBD steps. And
Okay.
Bart, are you around? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Right. Peter, can you go back to that great photo that you had of the TSBD steps? Because I mean, Bart, more than anybody, I suspect, has looked at every single photo taken around the steps, etc.
Okay.
Could you go back to go back and get the screen and show that photo to Bart, please? Just like I'd like Bart's view on some of the characters that you're pointing out.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I welcome all of the people that me. I don't consider myself an expert. I'm not saying absolute on any of this. I don't want to, make a stake a claim. But part of why I'm doing this is to introduce it to this community, who collectively might be able to answer some of these questions. You're talking about this?
That's the one. Yeah. If you could put your
Yeah. Let me just make it a little bigger.
Slideshow format so that it covers the
Yeah.
screen. Yeah.
Let me make it a little bigger though.
Yeah. If you do the slideshow, yeah.
So what I was saying is that this here's Doherty. Not sure who this is, but I know I've seen him many times. And this gentleman right here, who's holding his hand over his mouth, is the one that Larry Floor is interacting with when he's arrested, signals to him, and says something. So the fact that he's now over here makes it very interesting. This person here, at first glance, you say, "Oh, is that Jack Ruby?" I don't believe it is, but this guy here's talking into a radio. And then the only other thing that I pointed out was Doherty thought that he's bring down his power sander, to explain, I guess, why he's running up and down between the 1st, 6th, and 7th floors.
That's not Jack Doherty.
Right here?
No, it's not. Nobody has been able to identify him yet. That's the problem. So it's not. And Doherty was taller. That's what we know. And we know we had a birthmark on his chin as well. And we've been going through all the pictures over years, and we can't conclude for 100% who's Jack Doherty. It's quite possible that he wasn't even seen outside, but this is all pure speculation, trying to point
No,
people to
absolutely. Here's a
Doherty.
few photos of
No,
him.
that's not Doherty.
Over here? These photos?
No, that's not Doherty.
This is from his obituary.
No, it's not. It's rubbish. There's nothing that confirms that it's Doherty at all.
Okay.
So
Huh.
the jury is completely out at this point. Bill Fraser could help with that one, but I doubt he will. But that's not
So
Doherty.
might be then that they're putting in to his.
Yeah, people put a lot of credit on Doherty. I mean, Doherty wasn't really how you say, a normal person. He had quite a bit of post-traumatic stress disorder from the since the war, and
epilepsy.
and he was basically co-responsible of opening the Texas School Book Depositary with Joe Molina early in the morning
Right,
to start the heating system. And other than that, Doherty was just a worker inside. Nah,
Okay.
you know.
So,
Nancy,
Roy truly said he was retarded, but it says over here that he had epilepsy, and I know that his father
guys, come on.
intervened during his interviews to say that he does get confused with dates and numbers, as to explain why he wasn't, he was being sort of, if you didn't know that, he was being evasive about what floor he was on, and he was just repeating, the story incorrectly each time. So you're saying you think that's because he had trouble remembering?
Post-traumatic stress disorder.
Okay.
Nancy, you interviewed obviously Buell several times over several hours in the last couple of years. Did you ask him about Jack Doherty?
Not for a physical. I never showed him a picture and said, "Is that him?" Or never showed him a photo and said, "Can you pick him out?" or anything like that. So I can't give you an opinion of what he said on that. But he did talk about Jack as being. He called him a really nice guy, and he said he was not of low intelligence. He wasn't of high intelligence, but he was not an idiot, is the phrase that he used. He was not an idiot. I asked Buell about what truly calling him mentally retarded. And just as Peter did, I apologize for using the term, but told him I was just quoting what Truly had said. And Buell said, it doesn't surprise me that he would say that, but he was not in that kind of a condition.
Okay, that's
so.
Nancy, would you mind if Peter sent you this photograph showing that to Bill Fraser, please?
No, I will do that.
You won't?
I will.
Oh, you will?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If you pay me.
I thought that was going to be controversial.
Me, I will do it.
How rude. No, I was kidding.
I thought we were going to fall out there, Nancy.
Nancy, I may have a better candidate for Doherty. I've got somebody on the stairs when this is from the same time period where that photograph is from, who is standing, lurching over James Jarman and on the stairs afterwards as well, where there's other people standing between the couples. And there's a person who stands there and looks tall and he's lurching over, and he's always been my bet for being Doherty as such. So I'd love you to forward that one and see if it's them. Because
in this photograph, is it at all possible that's a movie camera he has in his hand?
Yeah, that looks like some sort of a tool to me.
I know you said a power sander, but I wonder, could it be a movie camera? I don't know.
Well, of course it could be. I thought it, to me, the story that I know was that because, as the gentleman pointed out, because he started earlier, that perhaps he took an earlier lunch, because his story was that he went back up to work after the assassination. After he heard the shooting, he decided to go back up and work. And so I'm not sure how, if it was a group of them laying a floor, what he would have to do other than sanding, because you couldn't lay a floor by yourself.
That is a movie camera.
You think so?
Yeah. Handheld one. You wind up. Yep.
Well, that's going to be interesting. So Bart, are you going to send another photo that you want me to run by Buell?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I will.
great.
Okay.
That'd be awesome.
I was going to go back to Paul,
Do you
but
have an idea of who this
I think-
gentleman,
sorry,
who this gentleman might be? Anybody?
Bart, do you know who this guy is on the far right
What with the glasses?
with the
And the
white
hat?
hat? The white hat
Yeah.
and glasses.
Yeah, I know. He's all one of the bystanders as well. I don't know. I absolutely don't know. That's a guessing game. You know what? Linda Zambanini did a lot on this, and but some people are just hard. And you know what? It could be somebody in law enforcement, but
Okay.
you know,
Is
you
it
need
something
you need
that's very
comparison
different?
photos. So
Yeah,
it's
I
gonna
mean,
be
I
really
know that
hard.
Peter's done some work on this, but he's still not.
Right.
not
My
convinced.
take, this may be Lee Eccles, who ran customs for quite a long time. He came in charge of retired intelligence officers, and in 61 or 62 was chased out of Arizona as the sheriff after a bunch of controversial things. Just from a distance, he looks like Lee Eccles, and there is some mention of Lee Eccles, you know, within some of the statements. But I'm not saying it is, but I would love to find out exactly who that guy is, because he's standing off by himself. He's not part of this group here, right? That I can agree with. And these guys would be traffic with the white hats, traffic police. Are you there?
Yeah, you mean the two guys on the stand, on the steps? Yeah, that's all traffic. Yeah, the four guys on the
People
steps.
with
Yeah,
white
they're all
hats, are they
traffic.
Okay.
Yeah, they are.
That's what I
The
was.
traffic.
Okay. And then
And
you have
two of the guys were actually standing right in front of the Texas School Book Depository before they were assigned to be there in the front steps.
and this guy here holding his hand over his mouth, has what's either a radio or a portable camera in his pocket, and he's the one that, as Floor is arrested, Floor is pointing to him, and they get close and they say something to each other. So I just found it fascinating that he would be back here, because I know that I'm not
You've
saying
got to
that,
understand. You've got to
but tell
understand that
somebody we don't have a
back in
picture.
that day in Dallas, as soon as somebody was being arrested in front of a crowd, just after what had happened, a lot of people were jeering on. You see that outside in the Texas Theater as well when Oswald's being arrested. There are plenty of shots of people basically jeering and say, "Kill him, fry him," etc., etc., etc. You know, so I don't think that's any different from what happened in front of the Texas School Book Depository when Floor was happening, when Floor was being arrested and taken away into the TPD. There were people shouting out stuff as well. So, and I think Floor has basically admitted that as well, that people were shouting at him
Oh,
afterwards.
absolutely. They thought that he was, they were swearing at him, die, this and that. But this is more of a signal, because it starts with Floor pointing to him. But I showed it earlier, so if you watch the video, I repeated it about 3 or 4 times to show that.
I saw the video,
Okay,
but I'm sorry, I don't buy it. I just don't buy it.
well, that's fine. I'm not trying to give absolutes here. I'm offering to the community, and I love the feedback, and I love to be corrected on something and learn. I have no problem with that.
Sure.